All right, Jens, welcome to another episode of Horror Joy Meet Your Maker. Today we are joined by two guests, which is a first for Meet Your Maker and maybe even Horror Joy. Brian and I are old and forgetful, so you'll forgive us. We should go back and check. But yes, with us today we have from Malarkey Books, Alan Good, who is one of the editors of Malarkey Books. Alan, are you the founder as well, or?
Yeah, I guess you would say that.
Awesome. And one of the authors that Alan's publishing, a horror author, we are really excited to talk about their work today, Lauren Bolger. So welcome both. We will start with our usual question. You know, our podcast is about horror and joy. Alan, we know that Malarkey doesn't do exclusively horror, and in fact, Lauren is one of your few horror authors, you said. But we're going to assume that you have at least some liking of horror, or we're going to pretend anyway, and ask you to answer the question of where you see the intersection of horror and joy. Lauren, same question to you. We can start with either of you, whoever would like to go first.
Let's let Lauren go first because she has more experience.
Okay, fantastic.
Sure. That's a tough question. I listened to a couple of your episodes just trying to, but it was almost bad because then I was like, oh, now I can't say those things. But yeah, so I was thinking just about just some of the themes of joy, just that a lot of times it's easier to find joy when you're young. And it kind of makes me think about how a lot of us found horror when we were young. And then just if it means a lot to us, then we try to keep it in our lives as adults, but it's a little bit more challenging sometimes, with time and trying to remind yourself, all the stuff that brings you joy. Kind of get stuck sometimes and forget to bring that stuff back in. So, but yeah, I think it's like just finding anything with like, finding that thrill and charged moments and just looking for things that rarely happen or couldn't happen, and then being able to like, I don't know, there's something about it's like just watching something horrible, but being able to watch it from a safe place. Not that I don't know how to, maybe that came out weird, but I don't know. Those were the things that I was kind of thinking through when I was thinking of joy and horror, because I don't know why it's so awesome, but it definitely is awesome. So.
I was just going to say that like part of the joy for me is like seeing how people react to like Lauren's books and we're making this zine that we call Hellarchy that Lauren was one of the editors of, and we're not going to sell like 1 million copies of any of it, but the people who care about it are like really excited about it, and that brings me joy.
I appreciate both the answers here. Alan, it feels like what you are talking about is the creative process and the reaction by the people that get it. So maybe it's not everybody, but the people that get it and the people that are involved in the creation of this kind of art, it works and it makes sense and it's impactful and it's meaningful. And I think that's really important. And Lauren, again, I think this is your answer. I know it sometimes feels like you're like, hey, I like horror. And people start to back away a little bit. And you're like, yeah, I like it. I like it when terrible things happen. And then it's like, that doesn't help at all. But you meet other people that like horror and it makes sense. I think there's something about that is inviting. And the invitation of horror, I think, is something we've talked a lot about here. But Lauren and Alan, both of you, I'm curious how kind of the origin story, as it were. What's the origin story? So for Lauren, like, how long have you been writing? I feel like, there's always this kind of curiosity about what it means for a writer to be a writer. And history usually plays a part of that. Is that true for you? And of course, Alan, want to hear about Malarkey, how that came about, if there's some insight about how that kind of history emerged too. So Lauren, maybe we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about your writing history.
Okay. I know the first short, I guess I could call it a short story. The first one that I wrote, I was in like second grade. So I think I read Wait Till Helen Comes, I think it's called, by Mary Downing Hahn. And then I just wrote my little imitation version of that story where like people move into a house that's like butting a graveyard and get haunted. So yeah, that's kind of where it started. And it was just kind of just ups and downs where you're like not doing it at all. And then you're doing it again. Then, English degree in school and got to do some like workshops and stuff like that. But here and there was writing like, poetry or short stories. And yeah, it just kept going. Wasn't always every day or every week even, but kind of stuck with me. So
Yeah, that's really great. I think a lot of writers, that's kind of it. We've heard from so many folks about how they start when they're in elementary school, and it's a love that gets sort of nurtured along the way, and then ends up being something they can still end up doing as adults. And I think like maybe there'd be more joy in the world if more people would have like tried to keep those hobbies along the way rather than just giving up all of them. That's kind of what Brian and I are doing here in some ways. Like this is part of our job in some ways, but it's also like something that is parallel that allows us to engage with the community in this way. And through that engagement, that's actually how, honestly, I found Malarkey and then Lauren, your work as well, was through Blue Sky, which, has, after maybe a slow start, sort of taken off as a replacement to the social media platform formerly known as Twitter. So it's so cool that there are so many independent publishers out there. It's great that there are venues for these voices to get their voices heard at, because I think like even on the Malarkey website, you all talk about the big four and how what the big four are looking for is more narrow each year. Like what will a quote unquote sell? Even though you go into Barnes and Noble or you go into Books A Million or you go to whatever your, the big chain bookstores are, and it seems like there's more books than ever. So it's a weird contradiction that seemingly from what publishers say versus what you see when you get into one of these stores. So Alan, maybe with that awkward transition there by me, you could talk a little bit about Malarkey and, the story behind it.
Yeah, it's a kind of a convoluted history. I didn't really plan on any of this. It just kind of started happening. I was designing my own books and, they looked pretty good. And I just decided, I had a lot of frustration with big publishing and even some smaller independent publishing. And I thought I can do it better than these other guys. And I was completely wrong about that because it's really hard. And we could have folded and collapsed a lot of times at this point. But we've had a lot of support from the community and from writers and readers that's kept us alive. But I guess if you're ever thinking about starting a publishing venture, you will not do it better than everybody else right away, at least.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. There are so many ways in which I think we look around and say, "Hey, I could do that," and then you get to doing it, and you're like, "Man, there's a lot of stuff that I did not know." But glad you're doing it. Glad that there are other voices for sure that are holding up people like Lauren and her work, and other indie presses that are doing this kind of stuff. That's more maybe more creative, more interesting. If you can find it, I mean, this stuff is really cool. So maybe we can transition, Lauren, to your work. We read the Barre Incidents. This is coming out October 1st. It's very cool. I think I didn't really know what I was getting into at first, but it like takes, like the horror thing and it takes the sci-fi thing and it kind of blends them together. There's a little bit of fantasy in there, if a little bit. I'm not a huge fantasy person, so if you're like down on fantasy, please don't let that scare you away. There's a lot of cool elements in this, and wanted to know kind of where you were coming from with this book. And certainly there's no I don't intend to mean like, hey, this is this is like this other thing and this is like this other thing. It's very much its own thing and it's very cool, but it felt almost X-Files like, and there are times when that kind of vibe hit a little bit. But are there other things that you were kind of, I don't know, I guess were inspirations, or is there something in your life that was inspiring for these kinds of stories?
good questions. Yeah, I'm trying to get myself in the game here because I haven't like talked to people like to any degree like out loud so much who have read it already. So I'm like, But yeah, so X-Files, I haven't rewatched it recently at all, but I loved it when I was younger. So that's awesome. But there are a couple other things when I mentioned like the Mothman prophecies, that's yeah, like the movie was awesome, but the book was one of the scariest things I've ever read. That's like it's by John Keel, so it's kind of like journalistic style is how it's written, and it's talking about aliens, interdimensional beings, like just all sorts of crazy stuff, and taking like firsthand accounts of people in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, right before the bridge collapse. So it's this whole, I don't know why I'm like kind of talking about it, assuming everybody's read it, which might not be the case, but that's a book that really scared me when I read it. So I did channel some of that. And then I do definitely dark fantasy for sure. I kind of, when I market it, I mentioned dark fantasy, and I kind of use some Norse gods, but then I take a lot of liberties. But additionally, like there's the band Ghost is like, I'm a big fan of Ghost, and they have a specific song called Zombie Queen, and it's one of my favorites. So it's sort of like, I use this Norse mythology in the book, but I also kind of like, that's a little bit of inspiration kind of mixed together with it. So yeah, that's kind of, and then like just world mythology as well. So I used a lot of that stuff.
Cool. So Barre, Vermont. It is a real town in Vermont. I have not actually Googled it. I'm assuming it is. Okay. I love stories set in small towns like this that have this paranormal or sort of extraterrestrial element to it. Brian said X-Files. I definitely felt X-Files vibes reading this book. It reminded me almost of some of like it's like the found footage cryptid type films that are out there now, which I'm like an unabashed huge fan of. I know most of these, like there are so many found footage movies out there that are just absolutely awful, and I will watch them gladly because I just need to know about the Frogman, even though he's just probably a guy in a big rubber suit, or I need to see Mothman, like where we are located. Brian and I are in central Pennsylvania, but both of us spent time in Pittsburgh, which is not far from West Virginia, where the Mothman sightings happened, and I just like think that it's such a cool urban legend that, or maybe it's real. I don't know. I'm not here to yuck other people's yums. Absolutely, possibly real. Giant flying being with wings and red eyes. Terrifying. I don't want to see that. But also, I don't want to go into my own attic most days. So I guess thinking about setting this in a small town like this with the history, the rich histories of the characters that you've created, we're not going to get into any spoilers, but the book begins with a funeral, right? Like that's kind of where it all starts. Why, I guess why, like the small town setting first and foremost for a book like this, but then also we have a character discovering kind of more about her father and the past surrounding her father than she ever knew, and like kind of remembering traumas perhaps that she hid. So just, can you maybe talk us through that part of that process?
Sure, sure. So definitely before it like existed at all, I was kind of like, I want to write my next book, and was kind of looking around. One of the things I love to do is like look up interesting places. And so yeah, Barre, Vermont is a real town, and it does actually have a cemetery that people will travel to visit, which is really cool. It's got like a bowling alley that works made out of Barre gray granite. And then it's got like really huge, just like classical, really huge monuments, but it also has like soccer balls, like, different things that are like, or airplanes, like whoever it is, like that's what they wanted. So that's what they got. So it's just, there's a lot to look at. So that's real. And it is actually down the road from the quarry. People working in the quarry will reserve a spot in the cemetery for when their last, for when they pass away. So I thought that was pretty fascinating. So yeah, I guess like the whole question with the Barre incidents is like, what if the miners like wake up from the dead and go back to work, which hopefully doesn't bother any actual residents if they ever see it. But yeah, that's like kind of how I started with it. So
I mean, that's a horror in itself already, right? You imagine I'm gonna work. I'm gonna do my job, and when I'm dead, I'll get to rest. And here we go. We're just imagining that nope, you don't get to rest. You just have to keep working. That's the horror of maybe our time right now, maybe our time for a long time. I don't know. I like this idea of like being set in a small town because of the histories that are there. I think you mentioned this. You weave together so many different kinds of mythologies. It never feels heavy, right? Again, there's a lot of discovery going on, and I think that's really cool. It never feels like it's bogged down. The Judaism aspect of it, the funeral, the Norse mythology, the Mothman and Mothman is always so fun. My daughter was Mothman for Halloween one year, still has this costume that she will wear because it's very warm and very cozy on like a winter night. But I think you do a really good job with this in terms of weaving this kind of mythology. I guess I'm curious about your approach to mythology. I mean, it seems like you're interested. Is this something you were an English major, it sounds like, but has mythology, Norse mythology, or different kinds of ideologies, is that something that you've been interested in for a long time?
It's a good question. I definitely am interested in it with when it comes to fiction, and I have books on it. I don't think I'm super, I took a mythology and fairy tales class in school. That was really interesting. And yeah, I definitely do like it. And I think it's really interesting where they intersect, where, you'll see the same kinds of stories in different parts of the world. And it's really crazy, like the world tree. There's so many different cultures that have a world tree. They may name it something else, but they all, most of them or lots of them have it. But just things like that are kind of fascinating to me. So yeah, that's part of it. And then I do have like a habit with short stories where I just keep writing stories where like a human thinks they're interacting with another human and no, it's a god. So I probably should stop writing those because that gets repetitive. But yeah, I like that kind of idea. I think it's interesting.
Well, I think like that element of the mythology you use in the book's really cool. And I also really like how you're linking places through like natural elements, like ecological features. Let me put it that way. So the trees, right? Like that's one element here. I'm not gonna say more than that, just the trees. And but how like so many places on Earth will see people have kind of built almost sanctuaries or sites of worship around like these natural elements, these huge things in nature that then like the way it's used in the book's really cool. The way it's almost like a roadmap, kind of. Let's put it that way. And with that, like, is that something that you have like had to research, or are you just like another thing you're interested in with like nature and trees and the like, or just I'd really like that use of that. So how did that idea arise?
Oh, I'm trying to remember. Do I even remember? I started writing about. I think the main thing I did with the world tree, I think when I found it, when I was researching, I can't quite remember, but something to do with I was researching online and I remember finding the world tree and then finding this whole idea that it like connects the underworld to the terrestrial world to the sky. And it just sort of like connected to characters that are in the book. It sort of like made them related in a way, and it helped hint at things that were going on in the story, help the characters uncover things. But I do think nature's awesome. I mean, I don't know like, like all the names of every tree I see or anything, but I definitely like will, see something, think it's cool and get curious and like look it up. But yeah, it was a lot of fun pulling that into the story though.
I think the story showcases a lot of wonder, right? So even the way that you talk about Barre, Vermont and the monuments, right? The kind of the way that things are built up, the way that human artifacts are integrated with ecological kind of, I don't know, places or even places of wonder. I think there's something really important there, especially as I don't know, I think the story really follows this kind of discovery. They're discovering themselves, right? Kara is discovering herself through her father and her history. But there's also like the quarry aspect of it. Feels like there's a tapping into something ancient. And I think for us in our culture, I don't want to speak for you, but my experience of especially American culture is that we don't really have a good grasp of ancient things, right? We're not Greece, and this isn't even speaking to indigenous populations here. There's something ancient about the quarry, about rocks, and about digging into the land. I think that there's something really cool there. I have not gotten a chance to read Kill Radio. This is your other book that's out. It sounds really cool. Radio directly to hell. That sounds interesting. I'm in. Folks, if you are listening and you have not read or heard of Lauren Bolger's, I'm sorry, is it Bolger? I didn't ask that question.
Vulture.
Bolger. We'll edit that out. I'll pretend like I knew the whole time. If you don't know Lauren Bolger's work, this is, I think, an author that you really need to get on your radar. Barre Incidents, sci-fi stuff, horror stuff, mythology stuff, fantasy stuff. It's all there, and it's done really well. And Kill Radio, that's on the top of my TBR now. It looks really cool. I'm interested a little bit, Alan, if you would key us into anything cool that you want to highlight coming out from Malarkey. in the next, I don't know, in the next couple months?
Yeah. Okay. Well, we have two books coming out the rest of this year. We've got Lauren's book on October 1st. Then we have a completely different book called My Ardent Love for the Pencil, and it's poetry and photography, and it really has nothing to do with horror. Although I don't know, maybe it does. There's some like rough stuff in it. There's some suffering in it and things like that. It's a really beautiful book. I'm super excited. It's by Vicky now, and she just got her copies in the mail today, and I'm really jealous because the boxes that are coming to me haven't got here yet. But we've printed it on like super nice paper. I have one print proof. It's amazing. It's like the most beautiful book I've ever seen. And then I'm really excited about Lauren's book because we've printed 300 copies with Bookmobile, and so people who pre-order or are in the book club are going to get those really nice like first edition copies. And not to like disparage the other edition that will exist, but the Bookmobile first edition will just be a little bit nicer. And then mainly after that, we just have a couple zines, and then our first book of 2026 will come out in March, and it's also a completely different direction. It's a long story about the author Joshua Trent Brown describes it as a Southern Odyssey, and I guess I'll leave it at that. But it's really good.
Yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to I'm obviously looking forward to My Art and Love with a Pencil, and having read the Barre Incidents. I'm looking forward to it being released, but I've already read it. So, there's like, I don't know, what's that feeling like when you're looking forward to something, but you also have already had that something? I'm looking forward to enjoying it again. There we go. We'll use that. But just listeners, the Malarkey Book Club is really awesome. Like, I think I belong to it through Patreon, and getting like a little surprise package in the mail, because you don't really order it as much as you sign up for it. And then the book, like the package shows up with King Lud's Rag, which is one of the zines that Malarkey does, and the stickers, like, just phenomenal. Really enjoy little surprise packages like that, because normally, as an adult, you get a package like, oh great, bills, or like, something that's not really mine, or something to that effect. I guess if we could, since along with King Lud's Rag, you mentioned Hellarchy as well. I don't know if either Lauren or Alan, do you guys want to talk about that a little bit for our listeners?
Yeah, I started it kind of randomly a few years ago, and the first time we did it, we just took stories from people whose books we'd published it, and we just put it out with them. And then the last 3 years now since then, Lauren, Olivia, and Eric have chosen stories for it, and then so they pick it out, and then I put it together as a magazine. This year's gonna be, I think, the best one. Fingers crossed. It also gets cursed sometimes. The first one that we made, I was printing them all at home. My printer broke like the day I was supposed to send everything out, and I had to go to Office Depot and pay like way too much money to get them printed. This year, the curse was the font disappeared, so I had to redo some of the layout. Just disappeared off my computer. Hopefully that's the worst thing that happens this year. We'll see.
Yeah, I think you lead with that you've got a haunted, cursed zine, and it's unfortunate. It causes you more work. Yeah, Lauren, you are welcome to jump into the kind of Hellarchy conversation. I do want to hear your thoughts about that, but I'll also throw out this last question too: is Lauren, for you, is there something that you have recently read, watched, or played, if you're a game player, video games, board games, otherwise, that has generated joy for you, especially in the kind of relationship with horror? So jump into Hellarchy if you'd like. Answer this question, whichever you'd like to do.
Sure thing. Yeah, so one of the things I recently read, this is a book that is out, I think, mid-October, and I was lucky enough to get to read it. The Scald Crow by Grace Daly. That is an awesome horror book. It is her debut. It's actually funny. It's laugh out loud funny. It's gross as hell. It's creepy. It's a really great story. It also has like disability rep, which I think a lot of people who identify with that are really enjoying. But it's real cool, and it uses Irish mythology in the story as well. It's so much fun. It's got just some weird parts where you're like, oh wow, you went there. Like it's such a good book. So that one I really enjoyed. And then the other ones I would mention is, I guess, just Eric Williams' book Toadstones, which is a Malarkey book. I am not good at reading short story collections. I'll read one and be like, that's great. And it's the same thing with shows. Like I'll consume like a couple or episodes and then I'll be like, I really enjoyed that, and then I'll just stop. But that one I just like read it very quickly all the way through. He's like kind of a weird horror person. He's a big fan of that, and it really comes across here, but there's also plenty of, modern horror stories in it as well, or like kind of a good mix of both.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm looking here at the cover of Toadstones right now, and this is just a great cover. Like anytime we're gonna have Ronald Reagan being like a giant demon somewhere, I'm here for it. Like I think Family Guy doesn't get a lot of things right, but it definitely got Ronald Reagan right in the one episode years ago.
I want to say thank you all, thank you both for joining us and talking through small presses, the Barre Incidents with Lauren Bolger, out October 1st. The very cool, it's not a subscription model. It's like it sounds like it's a club model. That's very cool. All of that sounds amazing. Thank you again for joining us. Check out that from Malarkey Books. Of course, check out The Barre Incidents by Lauren Bolger from Malarkey Books. It's really good, folks. Really recommend it. And as always, recommend that you find joy, even in horror. This has been an episode of Horror Joy, produced in conjunction with Axis Mundi Media. Thanks for joining us. We want to hear from you. You can find us at Horror Joy Pod on Instagram or at Horror Joy Pod on YouTube. You can also email us at horrorjoypod@gmail.com, all one word. And you can, of course, find us wherever you get your podcasts. Give us a like, subscribe, leave a review. Until next time, remember, seek joy, even in horror.